Tyrants, Tormentors, and the Tiara. Chapter 3. Clement and Darian raced down the street, searching for a place to hide. They needed to get out of the open before the High Mage could disperse the fog. Spotting a shabby stone house just a short distance to the left, Clement grabbed Darian's arm and gestured toward the run-down building. Darian nodded, and they hurried for the door. "Открытие!" Clement shouted, pointing at the handle. A loud gust of wind swept from his hand, striking the door. The barrier thrust open. Clement and Darian leapt into the house. Darian slammed the door behind them, barring and locking the passage. An elderly couple sat in front of a fireplace in the hut's lone room. They wore dirty, ragged clothing. Their leathery skin was wrinkled and weathered. They looked up in terror as the cloaked figures burst into the house. Clement strode toward them. The woman, knitting in an old, ragged armchair, held up her yarn and gave a feeble shriek. The elderly man, whittling in an old rocking chair, tried to rise. "That's your spot," Clement said. He held out his hands, with the middle fingers curled down. His index finger pointed at the man. The little finger pointed at the woman. Two beams of pale blue light shot from the outstretched tips, striking the couple. The old lady's half-knitted sweater fell into her lap, and her head dropped onto her chest. The man collapsed into the chair, the block of wood and whittling knife falling from his hand. His head reclined backwards, and a loud snore escaped his lips. "You did not kill them?" Darian asked, surveying the sleeping couple. "No," Clement said. "I didn't come here to murder helpless citizens. The man and woman will wake up tomorrow and think our visit was a dream if they remember at all." Darian gave a quick smile, but hid the expression behind an emotionless mask. Nodding, he strolled to the window and gazed into the darkness. "The fog is dispersing," he observed. "They will be moving down the street within the next few minutes. We might do well to put up some concealment spells." "True," Clement agreed. "Know any good ones?" "I do," said a female voice from the fireplace, causing both men to jump. The air in front of the hearth shimmered. Before their astonished eyes appeared a young woman, barely older than 30. She wore light blue robes, whose inner garments wrapped tightly around her lithe, shapely body. She reclined leisurely, her left arm resting on the mantel, as she stared at them in amusement. Exceptionally pale, blonde hair reached past her shoulders into the center of her back. Her eyes were an enchanting green and seemed to glow like a cat's. Her silky skin lacked the slightest blemish to tarnish her delicate features. Altogether, she possessed a simple and alluring beauty most men found attractive. Clement wasn't one of them. "You!" he hissed. His arms shot toward her. Hatred boiled in his blood. Energy surged to his hands. A deadly spell sprang to his lips. The woman smiled smugly, taking no actions to defend herself. Darian dove in front of Clement, grabbing his arms. "No! Someone will hear you! We cannot afford to give away our location over this rat." Clement stepped back, yanking his arms free. He glared menacingly at the woman. She gave an arrogant smirk, holding her head high as she gazed down her upturned nose. Darian looked at her, his eyes narrowing as he studied her haughty expression. "So," he said, gazing at her like filth on his shoes, "Lillian the Insidious returns home." Lillian's smile dropped, and her eyes narrowed. "Don't call me by that name," she hissed. "What?" Darian said in mock surprise. "You do not like your insidious title? You are not ashamed of having the smallest kingdom, the weakest army, and the feeblest powers? Why should you be bothered by a name?" "Men," Lillian said, "so obsessed with size, and yet your inflated militaries and massive territories proved helpless against my network of spies and assassins. While you murdered loyal advisors and friends to weed out my agents, I held your kingdoms locked within the clutches of my invisible hand. I possessed true power. All you cared about was being the biggest. Compensating for something, I think? How would you know? Darren retorted. When were you ever with a man? Excuse me, I mean a man who did not suddenly die a horrific death the moment you started feeling the slightest love for them. How sad that all your spies and plagues and access to the complete writings of the Magical Academy still left you helpless to break my curse as your paramours died one by one before your eyes. Lillian's smile vanished, but she held her head high. It taught me a lesson. There's no place for emotion in the life of a ruler. Except fear, you mean? Darian said. After all, O cowardly one, it was you who hoisted the white flag above your castle the moment Sylvia's forces set foot upon your land, fleeing your kingdom like a scared child. All of these insults and attacks, so ungrateful after I saved your lives. What are you talking about? Darian asked. Clement shook his head. He knew exactly what she was talking about, and he now knew who he had heard on the balcony outside the Queen's bedchamber. Oh, seriously, Lillian said. Even you're not naive enough to believe the guard tripped over his own feet before hacking Clement to pieces? Or maybe you believe the magical barriers disappeared on their own. No, Clement said, advancing toward her. But neither are we naive enough to believe you saved us out of generosity. You always have ulterior motives. Regardless, if you're going to enchant the house, you better do so. At least we can find out what you want and get rid of your nauseating presence. Lillian made a noise, throwing her long hair behind her head. She closed her eyes and waved her left hand, palm upward, in an arc before her. Priat, she sang in a melodic voice. The room filled with 1,000 swirling pinpricks of light, no bigger than a marble. The luminous orbs hovered like stars in the night sky, spinning softly. With each rotation, the balls grew smaller until completely vanishing. There, Lillian stated. Clement frowned. He recognized the spell from previous dealings with spies and provocateurs. It concealed the presence of anyone inside the room from all attempts to discern their location. Further, the enchantment prevented itself from detection. It remained a favorite among suspicious individuals because the spell collapsed if anyone other than the caster summoned magical energy inside the protected radius. How clever, Clement scowled. Casting an incantation effective only so long as we don't attack you. I am no fool, she said. We all know how we feel about each other, and none of you are above blasting me in the back the moment my head is turned. Caution is reasonable. You mistake us for yourself, Clement said. We fight people head on. We don't need to degrade ourselves by resorting to underhanded means to build our kingdoms. Underhanded? Lillian said in airy disbelief, crossing her arms. I have no clue what you're talking about. Using a plague to wipe out every nobleman and royal ahead of you in line for the throne, you don't call that underhanded? Clement asked. I call it resourceful, Lillian answered loftily. And murdering your father in his sleep? Opportunistic. And framing innocent apprentices for his death? I pardoned them a year later. I'm sure that provided great comfort during the year they stewed in your dungeon. Oh, what do you care about some stupid apprentices? Lillian burst out. And what do you care how I killed my father? He's the one who expelled you from the Magical Academy just because you were poor. You should thank me. Thank you? Clement fumed. You robbed me of my victory. The statement was true enough. At the time of Lillian's rise to power, Clement's armies were moving steadily southward. His plan put him on pace to conquer Roria within months. Revenge against his former master, Lillian's father, Soren, lay within his grasp, along with control over all Western Arba. Lillian stole both. "Regardless," Darian interrupted, "none of this has anything to do with why we are here."
"True," Clement agreed, still addressing Lillian. "What do you want? Why were you on the Queen's balcony tonight?"
"The same reason you were," Lillian answered. "Revenge."
"Going to murder her in her sleep?" Darian scoffed. "I am not surprised. You never had the guts to face someone capable of fighting back."
"My way is twice as clean and just as effective. Perhaps if you didn't have all the subtlety of a raging rhino, you could try it yourself."
"Anyway," Clement interrupted, "back to the point at hand. Why'd you follow us, and what do you want?"
"Seriously, Clement," Lillian said, "you're supposed to be smart. Why don't you put that hollow cavity between your ears to work and answer the questions yourself?"
The answer required little thought. She obviously wanted something they possessed. Not a physical object, which she could simply steal after their death. Rather, she desired information. She had not come to them before they entered the Queen's room, but followed them afterward, so the information must be related to something inside the room.
"The cloth,"
Clement said.
"You wish to know what it means."
"I do."
"Well, Darian, as much as it pains me to agree with her, I'd also like to know what it means. But first," he added, turning back to Lillian, "tell us what happened in the Queen's room tonight."
"No, that's my bargaining leverage. Once you tell me about the cloth, I'll tell you what happened in the room. Besides, I've already made the first compromise by casting the concealment spell. You can make the second."
"Fine," Darian answered, ripping the fabric from his pocket and tossing it onto the ground. "Here it is." Lillian picked up the cloth, examining the symbols.
"What does it mean?"
she asked. "How should I know?" Darian answered, moving the curtain aside and glancing out the window.
"I swear you're the world's worst liar," she said, shaking her head in condescension. "I saw your face when you looked at it. You recognized the symbol immediately."
"All right," Darian said, turning from the window. "The symbol is a coat of arms belonging to the descendants of an ancient bloodline. The name of the family is Junloris. They dwell in a secluded fortress, hidden deep in the Bloodfang Mountains, along the southeastern border of my former kingdom. According to rumors, the family and the keep have existed for over a millennia, protecting the land from the powerful and ancient lord of the demons, Darlith."
"Darlith?"
Lillian repeated.
"I thought Darlith was dead."
"No,"
Clement corrected her in a sarcastic tone.
"Seriously, your father was the kingdom's foremost expert on the history of the demon wars. Did you never listen to anything he taught, or is that why he refused to take his own daughter as an apprentice?"
Lillian's eyes flashed. She glared at Clement, but he ignored her.
"According to legend,"
Clement began, performing an accurate, if mocking, impression of Lillian's father,
"Darlith was the lord of the demons, and the only demon capable of using magic. His magic was so powerful that no mortal could stand against him. 1,000 years ago, he led his creations on a quest to conquer humanity. The 10 greatest sorcerers of the age, led by the legendary Kendros, crafted 2 enchanted spheres and placed Darlith into a deep slumber. As long as the spheres remained intact, the demon lord and his minions remained imprisoned. The orbs rest to this day, guarded by the most devout warriors. No demon has been seen since that time."
Clement finished and gave Lillian a smug look.
"Your information is outdated," she replied. "A demon has been seen since that time."
"When?" Clement challenged. "By whom?"
"Tonight. By me. That's what happened in Sylvia's bedchamber. A demon kidnapped her. I was about to break into her room when I felt the power sink. I looked up and saw a demon materialize out of thin air. I'm lucky I didn't get cut to shreds as he escaped through the window."
"So you're telling me the demons have broken free from their slumber?"
Clement said in disbelief. I am not surprised, Darien said. Clement and Lillian stared at him. Prior to Sylvia's rise to power, I received reports indicating corruption among the guardians of Junlor's Keep. Apparently, centuries of confinement, coupled with a lack of new recruits, drove them to desperate means for survival.
Countless generations isolated inside an aging fortress in an impassable and monster-infested wilderness will do that, Clement mused. After 7 years in a similar situation, I should know. We can assume the same fate fell whoever guarded the other orb.
But how did you find out?
Lillian asked.
Surely you had other things occupying your time without worrying about the events of a random keep in the middle of the Bloodfang Mountains. And why did my spies never report this news to me?
Indignant that I slipped one past you? Darien asked. Perhaps your spies did not have my kingdom down upon its knees quite as much as you thought.
Don't kid yourself,
Lillian snapped.
My spies held you like a vice. You couldn't even sneeze inside your castle without my knowing.
And yet you completely missed over a month of secret operations within the Bloodfang Mountains involving more than a dozen of my highest-ranking generals and apprentices.
What happened?
Clement asked, interrupting the sparring match. Toward the end of my reign, I sent a scouting party into the mountains to monitor for signs of invasion. Although I doubted anyone was foolish enough to march an army through those god-forsaken lands, I could not completely rule out the possibility of such an attack. So I occasionally sent patrols of soldiers, who I disliked or wanted eliminated, to scout the land looking for hostile forces. Once in a while, one of the patrols even returned. Darien shook his head in bewilderment, expressing confusion as to how such a bizarre and unfortunate event could happen. Anyway, he continued, this particular patrol found a weak and tired man wandering the woods. He begged to be taken before me. I granted him an audience, and he told me the most remarkable tale. He claimed he escaped from Junlor's Keep. He explained Junlor's Keep was one of the 2 ancient fortresses holding the golden orbs imprisoning the Demon Lord. He further explained that his family had served as guardians for many generations. But now, he said, a cult of powerful madmen and insane sorcerers was gaining power over the keep. The group, he explained, planned to destroy both orbs, thereby freeing the Demon Lord from his sleep. He warned me about the danger, and told me I could identify the servants of the cult by the Junlor's family coat of arms worn on their tunics. The symbol is the same one adorning the cloth. Clement and Lillian listened intently, waiting for him to continue. I was intrigued by the report, although I could not be sure it was not a trap. I offered him food and rest, intending to speak to him more on the subject later. However, he died mysteriously in his sleep the following night. I was rather alarmed for a guest to die under the shelter of my own roof and me not be the killer. So I sent a group of agents to the fort, under the guise of ambassadors, offering to provide them assistance and help in the protection of the orb. Darien was interrupted by Clement. The sorcerer closed his eyes, releasing a loud groan and burying his head in his hands. Oh, give him a break, Clement, Lillian said, smiling in amusement. Stealth and subterfuge were never Darien's stronger talents. Darien gave Lillian a withering look. He started to retort, but Clement jumped back into the conversation.
So, after they all vanished, never to be heard from again, what did you do?
I waited to hear back for 2 weeks, he said, beginning again. If he was irritated by Clement's ability to predict the result as though the end was obvious, his irritation only increased when Clement reacted to these words by burying his head in his hands again. Even Lillian shook her head in disbelief. Darien's voice grew in volume as his face turned red. Then I dispatched a group of my most skilled apprentices and thieves to infiltrate the keep. I ordered them to scout the area secretly, gathering as much information as possible. If necessary, I planned to steal the orb before its destruction. Unfortunately, I became distracted by the swift and sudden rise of Sylvia. Within the next few months, my kingdom came under attack, and I was overthrown. Thus, I never finished my plans.
Well, you don't need to worry about the orbs anymore, Lillian said. From what I saw, they are destroyed and the demons are free.
But, Clement interjected, if Darlith is free, why hasn't he revealed himself? Darien learned about the cult and their intentions 7 years ago. Why has he made no move before now?
In the Demon War, Darlith was defeated by powerful wizards, Lillian observed. He may fear such a fate occurring again.
Perhaps he fears Sylvia's growing power, Clement suggested. He may want to eliminate her before she can become a threat.
I don't think so, Lillian replied. If the demon wanted to kill Sylvia, he could have done so. Instead, he kidnapped her. I suspect he was targeting her tiara.
Clement looked at Lillian in blank confusion. Why would the demon target a headband? Darien asked.
For the same reason I was, she responded, smiling at their bewildered faces. Her tiara is the source of her might. You see, I knew Sylvia before her rise to power. She and I attended the academy together and apprenticed under the same master. We hated each other. She was an annoying goody-two-shoes, too weak to pursue the avenues of true power. I dare say I had a good assessment of her capabilities. She was an above-average sorceress at best. Even that may be giving her too much credit. The powers she displayed in her battles against us were far beyond anything I believed her capable of wielding. During exile, I found myself questioning her changed nature. How did she quadruple her strength in such a short period of time?
Clement listened with interest. He had wondered the same thing many times himself.
Then I thought about the tiara. After her rise to power, she wore the headband constantly, even in her sleep. Yet I couldn't remember seeing Sylvia wear any piece of jewelry on her head, even so much as a hairpin, during her entire apprenticeship. The development seemed suspicious. I began investigating the history of the object. I knew I could be wrong, but after researching, bribing, and extorting information from every vulnerable source, I managed to glean a few details concerning its history. Apparently, it was crafted shortly after her husband's death.
She was married?
Clement asked.
Oh, yes. Before her rebellion against our kingdoms, her husband, Robert, was a teacher at the academy. He died about a year before her rise to power, bit by a death spider.
Lillian shot a look at Clement, who smiled. Death spiders represented the pinnacle of his creative skills. Through a combination of breeding and magic, he had forged them. A spy released them into Lillian's palace. The poisonous pests failed to kill the spymaster, but spread like fire throughout the city. Lillian never truly eradicated the infestation, although sightings and deaths dropped significantly after her palace burned down.
I guess I know why Sylvia hates me so much,
he said, smirking.
I doubt she felt positive feelings for any of us,
Lillian replied.
As an apprentice, she always spouted idealistic rubbish about honor, virtue, and other stupid stuff. I wanted to gouge out my ears just to escape her speeches. Anyway, I learned the crown was forged by her children.
Her children?
Darien and Clement exclaimed in unison.
Yes,
she said, waving in a dismissive gesture.
She had 3 children. According to my research, they were extremely gifted young prodigies. They forged the crown as a gift. It enhances her magical powers to incredible levels.
So, Clement said, you plan to steal the tiara to enhance your powers.
I doubt the process is so simple, Lillian said, shaking her head. Sylvia isn't a fool, and though her children were young, they weren't fools either. I'm confident the crown is protected with a self-charm.
That's why the demon kidnapped her, Clement said, understanding dawning. Only she, or someone she gives it to, can use it. The demon lord needs her to willingly give him the crown.
Exactly,
Lillian agreed. But why were you after the crown if it is useless to you? Darien asked.
Isn't it obvious?
Lillian said, rolling her eyes. I want to steal the crown so she can't use it. Without the tiara, she can't maintain control of her kingdom and suppress the corrupt political forces lurking within.
In time, her empire will fail, and I'll have my revenge.
Nice, sneered Darien. Just grab the headband and run away like a child. Let others do your work for you. Good to see exile did not change you. Lillian opened her mouth to retort, but Clement spoke first.
Where are her children now?
He asked, scratching his chin thoughtfully.
I do not know,
Lillian responded, taking her eyes off Darien.
No one knows. I can't find a shred of information concerning their whereabouts. In fact, I can't find a single reference to them or a single person who has seen them since before Sylvia's rise to power. They appear to vanish completely.
Strange, Clement mused. 3 children capable of forging a legendary artifact at a young age must be growing stronger. Their skill and fame should be hard to keep secret.
Regardless,
Lillian said,
right now we have more pressing issues. If Darlith gets a hold of the Tiara and his already legendary powers are multiplied more than 3-fold, all the wizards in the world won't be enough to defeat him.
Does he really think Sylvia will give it to him?
Clement wondered aloud. Everyone has a breaking point, Darien said, shrugging. We all know, as well as anyone, about the power of torture.
What I don't understand,
Lillian interjected,
is why they left behind the cloth. Why do they want people to know they kidnapped her?
Maybe they always leave evidence behind,
Clement suggested.
There are cults who perform such actions. They may not believe anyone will recognize the symbol. Without Darien, you and I wouldn't understand its meaning.
They may not care, Darien said. With Sylvia gone, who will stand against them? The High Mage? The Demon Lord can crush him without a thought.
Perhaps,
Lillian acknowledged.
But something doesn't feel right.
I agree, Darien said. If Darlith is the only demon capable of using magic, who created the power sink? Who paralyzed the guards? How did the demon get into her room without anyone noticing?
I don't know the answer to any of those questions,
Lillian said.
Me either, Clement replied. But I do know one thing. I have no intention of letting Darlith rise to power.
Lillian and Darien looked at Clement in surprise. He smiled maliciously.
The world is mine, he declared. I didn't spend years building power to waste my life enslaved to some demon with a stupid piece of headgear.
Surely you are not telling me, Darien said. You are going into the heart of the Bloodfangs to save Sylvia from the Demon Lord.
I am,
Clement acknowledged.
And after I save the Queen, I'm going to kill her. I want to see how tough she is without her hat.
Clement,
Lillian said.
You know your powers are no match for the Demon Lord, right? Don't get me wrong. I've got no problem with you getting killed, and I regret not getting to watch. But you do realize you're going to die.
Yes,
Clement said sarcastically.
Because I'm really planning to fight him one-on-one. Come on, I'm going to do exactly what you wanted to do tonight. I'll sneak into the fortress, destroy the crown, and kill Sylvia. Then I'll sneak out again.
Right,
Lillian said with equal sarcasm.
Because you're so stealthy. You'll be lucky to get within 10 feet of the castle.
Well, if you're so good,
Clement responded,
you can come watch. You'll get your wish of seeing me die, and we can find out if you have enough guts to make your own attempt.
Do not make me laugh, Darien said. Lillian never kills anyone who is not already asleep. Lillian smiled, as though the observation were a compliment. And you, Darien said, turning to Clement, do not pretend you can kill Sylvia. Everyone knows the story of your last battle. Your best option remains using the orb. To do so, you need my help. Besides, I cannot kill you until we destroy the orb.
And whose brilliant idea was making that oath?
Clement exclaimed.
Great,
Lillian rejoined.
You're exactly who Clement needs. You couldn't be stealthy if your life depended on it. Which, by the way, it will.
Fine, Darien said. When Darlith takes over the world, you can sit around thinking about how right you were. Maybe Darlith needs concubines.
I don't think your curse will work on him,
Lillian responded. She turned and headed toward the door. Grabbing the handle, she looked back at them.
Well, if we're going, we better leave soon. We can get out of town more easily under the cover of night. Besides, your sleep spell won't hold the couple forever.
Wait a minute, Darian said. Who invited you along?
Clement did,
She answered. Clement opened his mouth to object, but Lillian cut him off.
You said I could tag along and watch you get killed. Sounds like fun. Besides, I came here to destroy the tiara. I can use the time while the guards kill you to complete my task. At least your deaths won't be in vain. Darlith will kill Sylvia once the tiara is gone, so your actions will bring about the Queen's death. You see, we have a win-win situation.
Clement and Darian looked at each other. Lillian was a conniving and dangerous opponent, but she knew their plans. If she was traveling with them, they were in a better position to watch for any treachery.
Very well,
Clement said.
I would demand a promise that you won't do anything to jeopardize our mission. But since I've no desire to take a blood oath, and you've no honor, the point seems mute.
Good,
Lillian answered.
Glad we can skip the formalities.
But,
Clement continued,
if I see the least sign of treachery, I know 600 ways to kill a person, and I'll make sure you experience at least one of them if it's the last thing I do.
It would be,
she said. She opened the door. Peering outside, she moved into the night. Darian followed her, but Clement held back. He glanced at the elderly couple, his eyes taking in their ragged clothes and dilapidated house. The setting reminded him of his own time as a poor orphan. He pulled 3 gold royals from the pocket of his robes and tossed them onto the floor.
For your troubles,
he whispered, and hurried away.